My name is Monk Rowe for the Phileas Jazz Archive. I'm very pleased to have Ed Sargent with me today. And you would be a person who might have a bit of a chore if you went to a party and said, someone, so what's your profession?
Mm, mm. Yes, it falls in the line of zookeeper. Uh, Sometimes um, being a tour manager, tour coordinator, it follows the phrase of herding cats. Sometimes, organized chaos and all of the descriptions that you can think of. However, when you're dealing with musicians in a touring capacity, I think if the question I think you're asking is how to transfer information is basically the key to my job. So if someone asked me at a party exactly what you did, I was like, it's like running a company that's constantly moving from city to city.
That's a good description. Um, it makes me think of a quote that a mutual acquaintance of ours, Dennis de Blasio, had to say, a little description when he was with Maynard, and he said, "Well, the road manager gets you and tells you all the rules. Someone else comes in and tells you something else, and then Maynard comes in and says, 'All right, you guys, two rules: be on time and play your ass off. Meeting's over.'"
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
But I'm sure you have to be a little more specific than that. But I think
Oh,
you
for
and I
sure.
have something in common. We're both musicians, but found something appeared to us that we could also do. And I have a feeling that being a road manager, there's something in you that was good at spotting issues and how to deal with them. Like it could be anything, like early on, like going to a gig and noticing, uh-oh, we need a 3-to-2 adapter, and then finding it. Is that a fair statement?
Oh, absolutely. It's a problem solving gig. I could never turn my phone off because it's a 24/7 job. If anything comes up, I'm the first call. Any problems on the road with hotels, venues, transportation, etc., it's my job to solve it. Throughout the course of my career, I tried to keep the band and specifically Maynard away from any kind of issues outside of music, which I didn't have my hands on because I felt like that if they could concentrate on music, the band, the stage, the audience, and not have to worry that the bus is leaking oil or the hotel just canceled 6 of our rooms or that flight got canceled to Ontario tomorrow morning, and we're going to have to find alternative travel. If I could keep those kind of things away from them, then I've done my job, and they can concentrate on music. So,
Did you
yeah.
ever have to almost be like a bouncer to
Oh,
keep people away from the, as you described, keep distractions away from the band?
I don't know, bouncer. I certainly learned early in my career information is on a need to know basis, and it's determined whether I think you need to know it or not. And that has to do with timing. There's oftentimes when, like, say, especially in the jazz world, you're having problems with the venue, that the promoter is acting squirrely. That's not something you talk about in the back of the bus. If it comes to uh, a point in time where it's got to go to the hands of the booking agent, which is his job, that's his fight to make, then certainly I would bring Maynard in to the queue as to um, potential problems. But I think in terms of my job as a tour manager, it's about evaluating when information is dispersed and when it should be dispersed properly. I like to keep, and every tour manager has their own style depending on the individuals in their organization, and they determine what works best for them. But in my organizations, like us with Maynard and certainly with Joan and the Blackhearts, I always try to get in front. I live 90 days in the future in terms of advancing dates, booking hotels, booking flights, things like that. I want to be in the front of it instead of behind it. And once I'm in front of it and we have a roadmap that's developed between me and my team, then we let the guys in the band and management and Joan and Maynard and all everybody know what's going on so they can plan accordingly what their life is, with enough time in advance. And certainly in the digital age, it's a lot easier to do it. Google Docs, which is a living document. The ability to have everybody in a group chat. Hey, I'm pushing the bus leave 15 minutes. Chill. See you there.
I was thinking about that, how when you started with Maynard, there's no cell phones. There's like,
Oh, GPS.
and you're
GPS
trying to
changed my
figure out,
life.
pardon? Oh, UPS did?
GPS changed my life. I sat in the front of the bus on the stoop with a map and a flashlight for so many years. I started with Maynard in 82. I was 22 years old. I sit up there with a flashlight trying to get the drivers, that could be half asleep or tired from running 400 miles, trying to get them around Washington, D.C. and places like that. The West Coast was a lot easier because the signage is much better. But, coming through South Philly in the old days when the construction was so bad that one wrong turn, in a 40-foot bus could take you 45 minutes to rewind and untangle. And yeah, so GPS changed my life. And the first fax machine I ever got, I just thought, we're here, baby. We're here. We can go all over the world. And we were doing a lot of European tours at the time. And I was working with a buyer, Gabby Kleinschmidt, out of the Black Forest, who worked with everybody. Miles, Chet Baker, lived at her house, Blakey, Mingus. I mean, she basically worked with everybody. Loved Maynard, and we worked with her every year. And it was always such a pain to advance those shows on the phone until we got fax machine. And I just thought, we're in the golden age, baby. So, yeah. When I started with the band, it was a lot different. But as the evolution of technology came into play, my job, I became not only more efficient, but more accurate, I would say. But certainly the efficiency level in exporting information that was necessary not only for the buyers but for my personnel as well.
When did Maynard start to elicit your opinion about the band, certain charts, and because you became much more than a road manager to him? What made him trust you musically?
Well, I don't know. That's a good question. I think our closeness had a lot to do with it. I was for 2 years I was Maynard's valet. When I hired onto the band, I hired on as a personal assistant. So I had an opportunity. I was the first person he saw in the morning, the last one he saw when he went to bed. I took care of his food, his clothes, his security, his movement. So, and he knew what he had too. I mean, he knew, I loved being there. He knew I loved his band and loved the whole scene. And fortunately for me, I was smart enough to keep my mouth shut and not let him know, kind of how green I was in the beginning. As I prayed the first day I was on the bus, Lord, just let me not mess this up and keep my mouth shut so they don't know right yet. So I kind of flew by the seat of my pants for a little while. But to answer your question, Maynard and I became very close over a period of time. And I come in 82, in the summer of 82, big summer tour, um, capped off by a week at the Madarao Jazz Festival in Hokkaido in the North Island of Japan. I went home. I took him home after this tour and kind of hung out in California for a little bit because he had some things around his house that he always could use help with. That's pretty handy. So I hung out with him and Flo for a week and a half. And I kind of at that point knew that I was kind of in. And so as the relationship built, he knew one that I was honest with him. And I have a musical background. Went to the University of Tennessee at Martin as a music major. I love to play. I love to be involved in music. Had my own little quartets and bands at the university, and booked him. That's how I got into his organization to begin with. I was booking. So I think innately he trusted my instincts musically, and this took, over time, as any relationship does, based on trust, through the years, then I was allowed the creative ability to produce things with him, for him, video, set lists, running through the set and just talking about him. His instinct for the set list in terms of the audience, 1,000 times better than mine. So I was just ears there. I loved, just being able to insert things at times, but I never want to take any credit for his ability to manipulate the set list in the show in terms of stretching some things out, audience reactions, because he was just the master of it.
Did
But
that did that programming skill of his include assembling LPs, opening tune, second side, first tune, and did you debate with him about those things?
never, as a touring operation, very seldom did he really concentrate on trying to promote the latest album. Now, in the course of your recording, a lot of times bands would go in, work the tunes out, record it, and then take it on the road. Well, with Maynard's band, and this is the way it's been throughout his career, he would work these tunes on the road, play with them on the road, get them where he wanted, and then take them into the studio. And oftentimes by that time, he's been playing them for 6, 8, 10 months, so he would pick the cream of the crop, or according to, if you're playing a festival relative to a jazz club, you manipulate the set for the setting of the audience. So he was never involved in the promotion of the package or of the product as much as he was the packaging of that evening for this particular audience. And a case in point, I'll make this quick, but some of the best shows that I've ever seen with Maynard and his band, 80, 100 people, in places like Blues Alley in Washington, D.C., and Georgetown, the Blue Note in New York, the small audience that are right there in front of them. And, it's harder to really, he used to say, he loved the festivals and loved the big festivals and loved seeing all the people. But you're competing. You're competing with space in terms of the ability to actually hear the band. And it's more about the feeling and hearing, and situational awareness goes together in that capacity.
Yeah.
And I love talking to him about things like that because he was the best, man. He could program a show.
Speaking of situational awareness, having spent a few years touring with a small group in a brown Ford Econoline van.
Oh, nice.
Personalities get amplified in those situations, and things, little irks, they start to irk you and so forth. And I can imagine that could be the same on a bus. Were you ever responsible for smoothing things out between members or just trying to take someone aside and say, listen, this is not conducive to the Maynard Ferguson Orchestra?
Well, maybe it wasn't daily, but it was certainly weekly. Of course, of course. We had a 40-foot tour bus with Maynard, 40-foot Eagle. We had 11 people on it, sometimes 12, depending on the band. And different temperaments of individuals, different levels of I don't know. I don't know how to say this nicely. A lot of times when guys first get on the band, as Maynard used to say, it'll take a couple of weeks before the clamshell opens. They're on the band, they're scared, but once they kind of get their feet under them and get a confidence level about being on the band, then you kind of find out who they are. You find out the temperaments of the people off the stage. He left that to me. He was the sweetheart that basically, now Maynard could not pay attention better than anybody in terms of the back of the bus bullshit, or roommate rivalries where I'd have to go in and separate roommates because A, they were going to kill each other, or B, they loved each other so much and was so excited about being on the road that they felt like they had to shut the bar at the hotel down every night. And then I had to go have to get both of them up the next morning and threaten to fire both of them. So there were several times where I had to separate roommates because they were too much trouble together. So yeah, in the bus, what we used to call the jar, it's like bees in a jar. And sometimes those bees want to sting each other. I've had, fist fights in the back of the bus that I had to separate between a certain drummer and a certain trumpet player. And I haven't had too many, downright fist fights, but I've separated some pretty heated battles. I pulled the bus over once when I went back and said, it's going to stop. It's going to stop now. Then I went back to my bunk and I heard him back there. So I had the bus driver pull over. And I said, you're not going to mess up my bus, but if you guys really want to tie into each other, shit, get out there. They're like nice big road, piece of highway in front of us. Nobody's coming. You guys want to settle it? Get out there and settle it. And they both stood there and looked at me. And I was like, okay, now it ends. Now it ends. We started back down the road. So, I mean, I'm glad they didn't go out and punch each other out. My job is really to maintain the integrity of each guy playing on the band each night. So I'm glad they didn't kill each other. But at the same time, you have to maintain. These guys were young, though, Monk. Some of the guys I hired were 17, 18 years old. Will Bonas, this great Canadian piano player. Rano Swansky, great piano player. Nathan Berg was 16 out of Kansas. And I hired him on bass and brought him out. And sometimes when we did clubs, I couldn't even let him in to do sound check, but get him in on stage right as the show started. He was 16, but he looked like he was about 12.
Did you hold your breath sometimes when you had a new person that you had hired, first gig, and you're in the back perhaps watching and like, oh, please do well?
Yeah, well, it wasn't long. I mean, I hired all the personnel with the combination of the musical director. He and I would basically weed through the chaff, to get to the grain, and then we would take take it to Maynard. These were back during the days of cassettes, and we could listen to it with Maynard, but Maynard was good for about 2 minutes, maybe, you know, and it was based more on who recommended him, who's bringing him to the table, what's the skinny on him. It's a good guy. And that's really how we would pick guys in the band. And now when I was started with Maynard, Buddy's band was out, and Woody's band and things like that. And guys at that point, kind of went in and out of different bands. So you kind of get a road feel for what those guys are. Then we also had good friends at University of North Texas, University of Miami, the instructors of those programs there, the guys in Syracuse, Buffalo, which was always a hotbed, Albany, that Northwest New York area, hotbed for great jazz players. And you kind of get factions on the band, from those different parts. So to answer your question, I was always nervous, a little bit with a new guy coming in, but that was kind of the fun of it too. And watching Maynard not interact with the new guy. He would never look at the new guy the first night because he wasn't testing the guy, because that's a test of nerves, not the playing ability. He would never, nor would he throw him into a bebop scenario when he heard the guy was a great blues player, or he had that Ben Webster sound. You wouldn't put him on, an up tempo, fast bebop thing. So Maynard's genius, I think, in a lot of ways. And I've said this before. He's like a great coach. You don't put a right fielder behind the plate catching. You find the position musically with the repertoire to what fits that player the best. Dennis is one of those guys that he could do everything. He can swing hard. He could play up-tempo stuff, his flute stuff. He was so versatile. And then you would have guys on the band that were such good blues players, good heavy swing players. And then you'd have the guys that could just eat up changes. Most piano players that we had on the band, could do a variety of all of it. But then there was those standouts like a Christian Jacob, a Jeff Lashaway, or Ronald Swansky, and guys that could just make your heart melt playing ballads and things like that. So, he was always great at finding out what's their bag, what do they really shine on, and then with Maynard, we played a lot of swing stuff, Latin stuff, ballads, rock stuff. And he could find out, he could sort through it pretty quick and find out who does what best, because he had an open canvas each night on the stage. And solos weren't set. He'd get guys in, trying different things, letting them hear them blow on certain things just to get a feel for where they're at. And he would know pretty quick if they were going to do it, cut it.
It's been about, in 2 weeks, I think it'll be 20 years since he passed away.
That's right.
And I wonder if you felt that he was at peace when he became ill and near the end of his life.
Oh yeah, better than anybody I would ever think of. Maynard was a student of a book called the Tibetan Book of the Dead, and he often mentioned it, in terms of the teachings, and he believed in reincarnation, that this was a trip around this time, and his devotion to Eastern philosophy and meditation. He knew himself, I think, better than most people know themselves in terms of what he's done on life. He never lived, he always said there were things I would change, but I don't live in the mirror of regret. And I always was fascinated by that and had the opportunity to go to India with him a couple of times to the ashram of Sai Baba, who was a spiritual leader in the south of India. And a lot of Sai Baba's teachings were about knowing yourself, knowing who you are, knowing your position on this planet, but also accepting the faith that God, whatever box you decide to put God in or not, Maynard, the higher existence has a plan that your life here is to respect the God in you as you respect the God in me. When he would namaste is respecting the love of the universe, the God that you hold, the God that's inside me, that is a part of the overall thing. So in terms of Maynard's, when he knew his time was coming, I'm quite positive he would rather stay around like all of us, but he was fine in knowing that now this time is over. Let the next one begin.
Thank you for that. I read that he would say a mantra before going on stage. I wonder if that was accurate
Every night,
every
of course.
night. Hmm.
May I bring love and joy to myself. May I bring love and joy to my band, and through our music, bring love and joy to the audience. When he'd shut his eyes and say that before he walked on stage, he meant it. And then he would take a deep breath and smile. Let's do it. Let's play some music. And he wanted his guys, and just on a side note here, we talk about that pre-stage ritual. You know, there's nothing more exciting than those moments right before the house lights go down. And the band's backstage and everybody's grooving and everybody's ready to play. They're like horses in the chute, ready for the bell to be rung. So I always loved about Maynard's band because they were young. They weren't jaded from 50 years on the road. I always got to see, and that's why Maynard loved to have young guys, that new blood, that excitement before the show. That was always fun with him, and he always loved that kibitzing before the show, and cracking the guys up. Maynard had a brilliant sense of humor. And we had some funny cats in the band too, man. And Maynard was always so quick to laugh. And Dennis was the master of the comedians in the band that always had the ability. He could crack Maynard up on stage where you couldn't even play. And Maynard, which is always great because Maynard wanted a fun stage. But backstage, we always had such a great time. And right before the house lights come down, I always loved that backstage energy, and the point I wanted to really make was no matter what's going on in your life, everything else you leave backstage. When you walk on his stage, you don't bring the problems you have with your girlfriend, the fight that you had with her this afternoon, or the fact that maybe you've lost somebody close to you in your life, or in any kind of financial problems that you're having at home, whatever problems you have in your life, when you're standing there backstage before you go on stage, you clear it out. Because when you come on his stage, he wants you concentrating on music. If you're having any kind of little tiffs in the band and he picked up on it, that the lead trumpet player and the drummer was about to tie up, boy, he would sort that out right on stage in front of 400 or 4,000 people. He did not put up with it. And that's the brilliance of being a great band leader. But we didn't have to have those talks too often because they all knew, and then they could read Maynard pretty well. But when you're on that stage, you play music and you bring everything you got because they saw him bring everything he had.
When we spoke on the phone yesterday, I'm trying to remember the context, but you used the term old school. And I'm sure you would apply that to Maynard. And I wonder now that in another genre of music, you're doing a similar task, but can people be old school in the rock world?
Oh, for sure, for sure. And I work with one of them. I work with Joan Jett, and I've been with her almost 20 years now. She it comes right out of the foundation of that old school. Just like Maynard, on the days of the show, the regimen has to maintain itself to produce a show that they're looking for, in terms of sleep, eating, uh, time before the show, the time that's designated for getting dressed before the show, for warming up for the show. The mentality of the head space on the day of the gig is all about the gig. Whenever and that's why I always tried to move interviews to days off or travel days. I mean, I can't tell you how many times that we jumped on a payphone in a truck stop while we're getting fuel, and Maynard's knocking out a 10 or 12-minute interview. You know, Joan, not so much because I started with her in 2007, and we are coming into cell phones and those kind of things. And she wouldn't do an interview or doesn't like to do interviews on the days of the show because her head is focused on the show. And so, yeah, old school. Joan is definitely old school. And the people that we've got to tour with, that I have got to hang out with other tour managers, Styx, Bryan Adams, Boston, Aerosmith, Def Leppard, these kind of things that we tour with under the umbrella of touring with Joan, Heart, Cheap Trick, my favorite live band of all time, ZZ Top. Getting to find out now, these come from old school. These are classic bands from the late 70s, 80s. There has to be an old school mentality there because they're old. We're old. We when the gig stops becoming the most important thing of your day on show day, then you should stay home. And it has to be. And if that's an old school mentality, then fine. I'm good with it because I respect it. And Maynard certainly adhered to it because nothing was more important on the day of the show than the show. And if it stops being that for anybody in this band, then they needed to go home and sell cars.
Did you ever work with someone that you could tell that was happening to, and you decided, well, I'm going to get off this train before it descends into something I don't want to be a part of?
Of course. Yeah. Yeah. It only happened to me really one time where I got into a situation with a singer out of Nashville. Now, I didn't do any country really um, to speak of. Um, but I took and Maynard was in India over a Christmas break, and the booking agent, who was a friend of mine, was venturing kind of into it was an alternative country rock kind of thing, and I went out and I didn't. There's just some people you jihad with, as they say. Me and Maynard, we hooked up. We knew we were buds after the first couple of days on the band that I was out there with him. I knew that we were going to be good, But then I got into this situation where um, it wasn't good, and I did not. There were some drugs, just things that I didn't. I just felt like you don't really respect the music or the audience that you're playing music for and don't want to be a part of it. You know, that's one thing. That's one thing. But I'll share this with you. I went out with Art Blakey and the Jazz Messengers. Got a call to go out one summer. Benny Green was on the band. Javon Jackson. That was a great band. There was a little white kid from Memphis, long hair. Art played in Memphis. I went and met him at the Peabody Hotel downtown. That's where he was playing. And I was going out basically to pick up. I wasn't uh, I wasn't in charge of logistics. I wasn't tour managing. I was like tour accountant for a, rock acts have tour accountants. We have with Joan on big tours, arena tours, stadiums, stuff like that. We have accountants that oversee a massive amount of money.
Yeah,
But I was going out. I
the
was
jazz
going
world,
out.
it doesn't take that long to count the money, does it?
That's right. I was going out to keep Art from picking up. You dig? So, and it was agreed upon by Art's management. And then I come out and Art and I found space, but it took a few days. Let's just put it like that. But it was interesting. I try to be a nice guy, you know, and Art pushed that. He made it until I started giving it back to him, and then we got right. You know what I mean? I mean, it basically come down to, hey man, I'm here to do a job. You don't want to go on stage, you don't have to, but you're not going to get paid.
Yeah.
Well, this kind of thing. Because the second day we flew into um, from Memphis, we flew into Los Angeles, doing the Hollywood Bowl, Playboy Jazz Festival. Art flew with his drums, and we got everything but his kick drum. His kick drum didn't make it on that flight. It was coming in on a later flight, and Art was, I'm not doing this. I'm not playing. You go tell him I'm not playing. I'm like, okay, man, you don't have to play. You don't play. You don't get paid. And Bill Cosby was the MC. Now, this was my second day, but I'd been with Maynard for 8 or 9 years. So I was, the leather had seen some sun, as they say. So I'm like, okay, no problem, man. I'm not going to argue with you. I'm not going to beg you. So so I'm leaving. Bill Cosby wants to know, he coming down the hall, wants to know how Art wants to be introduced. I was like, well, Art's not playing. He just told me he's not playing. He's got a big guitar. What do you mean? I said, well, he didn't get his kick drum. He said, where is that old bastard? So I took him in, and it took about 30 seconds with Bill. Suddenly Art's playing the gig again. So great old memory in my life and story for me. But the Art thing lasted about 2 weeks. And by the end of the 2 weeks, Art and I was good. We were hugging each other on the way out. But
Great. I can just picture Art Blakey coming to Ed Sargent for a payroll advance.
yeah,
It's a
okay, and
good
he did too.
image.
Look, going into New York, flew into New York, and I had ground transportation to the Washington Square Hotel on the northwest corner of Washington Park, near the Blue Note. Had Art a room that he did not sleep in, and he wanted some money when we were at the airport. And he'd already made other arrangements for a ride, one of his boys, one of his buddies. And Art showed up to the gig about 6 minutes. No sound check. We sound checked without him, set up without him. He showed up to the gig about 6 minutes before the downbeat the next day. And that was also a little, hey, I'm the boss. I'm here. Mind your own business.
I see.
That's fine with me. We'll get paid. You play, we'll get paid. That's what I'm here to.
Well, you've got a few good stories, Ed.
Well, yeah, I've been doing it a long time.
Does the rock concert um, give you more to be concerned about, or the light show? the larger sound system, all that, does that fall on you as well?
Um, that's a great question. And coming from my background with Maynard and with the jazz and jazz festivals and those kind of shows, everything changed walking into the rock show. You can think of it what I do, it's the same nuts and bolts, but just a much bigger vehicle. With the rock, with Joan, I got a 5-piece band and an 8-man crew. So I have the ability to separation of responsibilities and for me to be able to compartmentalize different facets of our operation. I've got 2 guitar techs that deal with stage right, stage left. I've got a drum tech. I have a brilliant lighting gal that also does merch. I've got a sound engineer. I've got a monitor engineer, and the sound guy and the monitor guy kind of take the production manager capacity. So everything is compartmentalized to a point where, as a tour manager, I can see the overall picture and manage the overall picture. But we have different facets of responsibility for guys within our operation that, something with regards to Jones amps need to be addressed when we're coming into New York in 2 weeks. Then, then I deal with that. Yeah, let's make it happen. When are we dropping it off? When are we picking it up? Is it coming in to Madison Square Gardens, which we play when we're in New York? And we have lines of distribution for those kind of things, all kind of production things. Do we have, I take care of getting the band back and forth, getting their crews back and forth, ground transportation, movements, things like that. But my crew, video walls, IMAGs, sound system advance, knowing what we're coming into. And the key really, and I tell this in my master class when I speak, to colleges and universities and stuff like that. And I basically say, really, kind of the key to my success is advance work, getting in front of potential problems on day of show. There should be no surprises on the day of show. And working with my department heads, if that's what you want to call it, is being able to advance these shows, be able to see around corners for potential problems and deal with them effectively and teach the people that are ultimately responsible for these things how to do that and for a successful show. But yeah, these shows are huge. Festivals are huge. When you're playing for 40, 50, 60,000 people, the production value level goes way up. You're dealing with split stacks for audio, you're dealing with multi-million dollars productions on stage. I mean, just think about the stadium tour we did with Motley Crue and Def Leppard, Joan, Poison. You had 50 buses backstage and 55 trucks, 55 semi trucks, and 50 buses. I mean, just think about parking that bunch for around the stadium, and the having you need ground transportation just to get the artist from the bus to the dressing room.
I could just
Yeah.
picture you putting your head on the pillow and going, "Oh crap, I forgot about, any number of things."
Yeah.
This will sound like a silly question, but did you did you get yourself a good pair of ear protectors in this
Um,
work?
I, I tried to protect I'm fortunate to say I don't have tinnitus. And I find that a gift from God, basically, because I worked for a high note trumpet player for all those years, who everybody knows Maynard was anything but subtle. And now I work, with Joan, with a rock and roll band, and toured with people like like the Def Leopards, and where everything is loud. And I've tried through the years to protect my ears. So I'm happy not to have tinnitus, but yeah. Motorhead, I was going to Lemmy with Motorhead, you know that band. Well, that was my second tour, was with Alice Cooper and Motorhead and Joan in Europe. Um, uh, and that was the loudest thing I'd ever seen. I even have a Motorhead shirt that says Motorhead, louder than everything else. So they lived up to it.
Well, you mentioned, I think it's wonderful that you're doing classes and because the music business has changed so much, it's nice that there's this avenue that you took and now you're teaching other people that they can take it as well. Because professional musician doesn't seem to be getting any easier.
Correct, correct. And two points, two thoughts that I want to share. One, in terms of being a musician out now, Maynard used to say, how did Chick Corea know that he was going to be a piano player? Well, he couldn't help it. How did I know I was going to be a brass player? Well, I couldn't help it. But there are lots of students that I talk to in the educational environment, even in the high school. I went and spoke to my local high school. I was a music ed major. I loved playing drums. I walked through a door that presented opportunities to me that I didn't say, God, no, I have to be playing on stage. The world we live in now offers opportunities at many levels in the touring industry and in the music business that doesn't have to do with playing. You can always be a player, you can always be a musician, but there's ways to support yourself, obviously outside of playing an instrument, that are necessary jobs in our market. You want to be involved, you want to tour, learn trade, learn lighting, learn sound, learn rigging, carpentry. You know, some of the happiest people and well-paid people on the road are my drivers. Bus drivers. But there are so many people, and also too, I encourage females to not sit on the sidelines and put themselves in a box. Our production assistant backstage is a lady. She's done, I got her from a buddy of mine that she was out with us on the Who tour 15 years ago. And Lady Gaga, she's done everybody. My lighting person, goes out occasionally and does sticks, but does Joan predominantly, and I don't want to lose her. But she works with Trans-Siberian Orchestra in the wintertime when Joan's off. The stage left guitar tech out of Phoenix. We pretty much got her from Alanis Morissette, kind of poached her, but Alanis wasn't working, so we grabbed her. I got three females in leadership roles on my crew. So, and I love telling these kids that don't sit on the sideline and think that you can't work in this business because you're a female, because that's just not correct. I cleaned that up. So yeah, it's important to me. And just real quick, Maynard spent 80% of his time in the educational market, playing high schools, colleges, all over the country. No one ever played more high schools and colleges than Maynard Ferguson in his band. Buddy did some, Woody did some, Stan did some, but the cream of the crop and our nut was in the educational market, and that's where Maynard loved playing these schools. We would go in and do workshops, classes. We would come in and do 30 minutes with Maynard in front of the band, come out and kick them in the head with something great and up tempo and fast and get their attention. And then we would break off into sections, brass, woodwinds, rhythm section, in breakout groups. And then Maynard would go and work each class, and it was brilliant. It really was. And that's very important to me. I love the enthusiasm that he had for bringing music and sharing music with these kids. I can't help it. I mean, I lived on the road and never had kids. I couldn't really. I never stopped long enough to do that. But I think providing, I think kids should be involved in the arts and music in particular. And I tell these kids, kids that are involved in music, traditionally score higher on their ACTs. Their hand and eye coordination is better. Their social skills, that because they interact in a team environment, a non-physical team environment, sharing music, and the beauty of making music with other people is a beautiful thing. So I love that was Maynard's. I love that he loved that, and he taught me to love it, and I love trying to share it in my little way as well.
Well said. It's been a wonderful, terrific conversation. Sometimes I'll ask a question that doesn't usually work. And it's like, what's your worst gig? So I'm gonna change a little bit. Can you remember what your best and most bizarre save was? In other words, something's really going wrong here and I have to fix it right now.
Yeah, this one's going to come to me about 3 o'clock in the morning because there are several. Um, yeah, there's several, but one that particularly comes to mind with Maynard was a date called Leverkusen. It is Leverkusen, Germany, and there's a wonderful video on this. I got two now, but I'll give you the first. Leverkusen, Germany, and it was with Gabby Kleinschmidt again on a Gabby date, and we were going in to do a video. Now this was a 7 camera video shoot um, in a beautiful theater, like, amazing lighting. This was probably 93, 4, something around there. And we had what was supposed to be a 4 hour bus drive down. I think we were coming from Cologne, maybe. I can't remember. But it was supposed to be a 4 hour bus drive. Get in 4 hours before the date, sound check the band, uh, uh, get all the camera positions, and I always got to call the camera cues because I knew the show, and work with the camera directors and in the truck. It was a truck shoot, and it took us about 9.5 hours because of a wreck on the Autobahn. We walked in about 10 minutes before we were supposed to go on. We put it into gear. Everybody knew what it was. Maynard especially did, but it's one of those things where it is what it is. Well, let's go in and do our best. And then right before the uh, the band went on stage, when Maynard had a little chat with the band, he says, "Days like today make the greatest gigs of all if you let it." And this band walked out on that stage, tired from the day's trip. No, it hadn't eaten, and this band was on fire. And Maynard comes out and smokes Blue Birdland right off the top and said, "Let's go. Here we go. Come on." And start out with Take the A Train, I think was the open, and they just burned it down every tune. And it's those kind of things that you get halfway through. It's just, this is unbelievable. I can't believe this. I can't believe A, that we're pulling it off, but B, knocking it out of the ballpark. And we got a great video from Leverkusen. So yeah, that was a good one. So Yeah, I'll go with that one.
All right.
There's tons like that though, about there's always complications no matter how good you try to advance and there's always going to be
There's
surprises.
going to be a
Um,
surprise. Yeah.
yeah, that's the nature of what we do and it's what kind of keeps it interesting.
Well, I hope you able to deal with all the aftermath of Joan's accident, and I hope she recovers quickly.
Thank
And
you.
man, this has just been a marvelous chat, and I want to thank
Thank
you
you,
for your
Monk.
time and whatever comes next for you.
Oh, it's my pleasure. It's a pleasure to be here and talking to you.
All right, I'll just pause our conversation and we'll say our goodbyes.